Matthew, joined by my co-host Alec Harris. As always, Alec, what's going on, buddy?
I'm loving your share today.
Thank you.
A strong message of unity.
Thank you. Yes, exactly. I brought it out for our special guest, John Altorelli from Terraverse TV. I hear he's a gold fan. So, we have a few different generations here, a few different generations of assets, and I figure we can talk about this and more today. So, John, thank you very much for joining us here.
Thank you very much, Matthew and Alec. Appreciate it.
Yeah, so can we get a very brief, typical little background story of how you started Terraverse TV and how you got into YouTubing?
So it's a kind of a cool story in the sense that you're right. I'm the boomer. So just to get clear on the set here,
I didn't say that.
no, I take full responsibility, and not only that, but I'll also I'll acknowledge all my privileges up front, so we get that covered. I'm white, middle-aged, able-bodied, heterosexual, cisgender. Let's see, what else do I have there? But I pretty much get all the categories of privilege, so I'll acknowledge those up front, so we'll get that out of the way. But
Fair
as
enough.
a boomer, I was a bit skeptical about crypto, so I was a poo-pooer for years, and I had a bunch of friends that were younger millennials, and they were saying, John, you might be wanting to consider this might be your age, not your intelligence, that's getting in the way here. And I realized at the end of that's exactly what it was. I was just saying, shit, I don't need another gold, I don't need another asset class that I got to deal with that I don't understand. And I didn't understand the crypto world. I didn't do the work. So it was my fault. Okay. I just didn't understand it. And plus, there was a lot of scams. For me as a lawyer, so I'm a lawyer, right? 30-year corporate lawyer. I've seen every kind of scam you can imagine, right? So I'm not a big jump on the bandwagon for bubbles, because that was always something that we always work through. We were on the beginning, we were on the end, we're in the middle. So I just didn't see much to it, and finally, I realized, okay, I can't even talk to people, right? Anyone that was a millennial or under, really, they didn't want to talk to me about stuff because they just assumed that I was, ignorant and not willing to listen. And I realized they were right. It's fair enough. I wasn't listening. I was just took my own view. So what I did was I said, okay, how do I learn about this stuff? And how do I learn about it quickly? Because I don't have time to spend 10 years, getting into the Twitter battles to see what was going on. Because, that whole, there's so much, the whole universe of the crypto world was all online effectively, right? That whole history is written pretty much online. I didn't want to go back and read it, so I figured I got to get somebody in here to help me.
Taking a moment to remind you that this show is brought to you by Trezor, home of the original Bitcoin hardware wallet. For over 10 years now, Trezor means business in Bitcoin security and functionality. When using their wallet software Trezor Suite to connect to the Bitcoin network, you're automatically connected via Tor, protecting your identity and giving you full control of your coins in a fully open source manner, both on the software level and on the hardware level. So head on over to Trezor.io to grab your brand new Trezor Safe 5 with a secure element, as well as a ton of available accessories to back up your keys and keep your coins safe.
So I had a good friend. His name's John D'Agostino. He's heavily involved in the industry. He's works with regulators and he's on the board of Coinbase and some other very, very prominent crypto funds, Block Tower, some other places. And he knew all the people. So I said, John, can you bring in some people? We'll have a dinner at my house. Bring in some people, and let's see if I can learn. I'm going to just shut up and let these people, talk to me, and I'll just listen. So we did that, and it turned out to be like one of the most fun nights I had in a long time because, during COVID, everybody sort of went in their hole. No one came out. People were not talking to each other. People were not going to work. And, just sitting around with a bunch of cool people who really were into it. I mean, really were into it. They were involved, and they were almost religious about it. I sort of got a lot of sense that, wow, this is a movement that I need to pay attention to because people really are believing it. And these were smart people. So I had a lot of respect for them. These are people who are very smart people. And if they were believing it, I needed to listen. And I started to. And then so we decided to do another one. We brought in somebody, another big player in the game. eventually, once we got, Scott Stornetta, the guy who did the blockchain. So over time, we got bigger and bigger people in the industry to come in and talk, and more people wanted to show up. So we just decided, okay, we got to formalize this thing. It's getting to be too big. It's fun, and we want to make this thing work. People want something. So we started this thing called the Terraverse Salon, and I styled it after sort of the old school intellectual salons where people from the top people in the world would come together and have a glass of wine and chat about big issues. Now, that's heavy aspirations, Matt and Alec. I was going to compete with those guys, but I just thought it would be cool to style it that way, and we did. And John came up with the name Terraverse, which was sort of a spin on the metaverse, because the metaverse is being virtual. We said, well, we're going to do ours in real time with real people. We're going to have them sit in my house, and we're going to share ideas in person. So we called it the Terraverse, and we started doing these monthly meetings, and we did it for about 2 years. And then when the big sort of first bust in crypto, with FTX and all the other funds that fell apart, there was a lot of depression around it. A lot of people got washed out. The industry took its normal course adjustment, and we stayed the course. But we expanded the universe of topics from Terraverse. We started to look at AI, because AI is a big component, which is also going to be tied in very much so with crypto. I think there's going to be a lot of synergies there from the people from both of those worlds. And so we expanded them there, and we ended up, spinning off of the topics that we didn't expect to. We had David Grush, the UAP whistleblower. He was here. We've had a lot of great people, a lot of military guys. You guys probably know I work a lot with ex-military. I do a lot of charity work with those guys. So it's just taken off. It's been a great thing. It's gotten so big that we started to film it and put it on a podcast, because people that want to come, I can't fit. I finally got, too many people at the house. I had to cut it back. And then we just started doing content on some of these things, interviewing the people. And of course, I've been hitting on a couple of social issues just because you can't help it today in this world. And again, I'm trying to bridge the generational gaps, bringing my perspective, and also trying to listen to the younger perspective, because they have a whole different point of view today. And it needs to be listened to, and it needs to be paid attention. And I think some of us older folks need to, to get in there and try to help solve the problems, rather than just, poo-poo, people's new ways of solving problems. So that's my story on that. I hope that's not too much for your viewers, but that's how we got into it.
Yeah, so I was telling Matt that it truly is a place where ideas and conversation is welcome. And I've made friends there, and you and John D'Agostino are very different people, right?
Totally. He's a millennial.
Yeah, and yeah, just but the conversation is always great. I've learned a lot there, and so kudos to fostering a place where people have closely held beliefs and are willing to separate from the beliefs and the conversation to foster conversation. You mentioned David Grush, so we're going to go right into it.
Sure.
That particular evening garnered some chatter online, but it was also a really interesting conversation. I think the more important part was the conversation that was had, because of David's presentation. So David Grush being he's testified in front of Congress, well-known whistleblower on the UAP programs within the DoD and allegedly elsewhere within the government, and he makes a lot of claims about what we have and what we're trying to reverse engineer. And my sense is that there's probably more there to be discovered, and he's not the only whistleblower we've seen. So where do you fall in the aliens, not aliens, government, not government, spectrum?
I think good thing is I'm sort of consistent across the board. So I'm a lawyer. I'm also started out my career mostly in engineering and in the military. So I'm a skeptic. I'm a skeptic by nature. I've always been a skeptic by nature. My job is to find the truth, and and we have to dig deep as lawyers to find the truth, because mostly what you see at the peripheral or at the sort of face level is never the truth. Whether it's business, whether it's government, no matter what I do in life, I know that whatever you think you're hearing on the news or wherever you're hearing it, it's not the truth. I'll give you the truth. It's a lot different, because that's how things are. People dress things up, right? the way they want you to see them, not necessarily the way they are. And that cuts across all of humanity, whether it's how I want to present myself to women or whatever. We all put a dress on, dressing it up on the outside, and that's never the story. You got to dig deep for the story. So for me on the alien issue, one, I'm smart enough, I think, to know that the probability is beyond doubt that there's got to be more to what's going on than what us, than humans. Second of all, I'm also an on and off spiritual guy. I come back and forth to my faith. So I believe in much bigger things, and I've come to have enough experiences in my life that now someday we can talk about some of my own personal experiences where I've been touched in ways that it can't be explained. Okay, it cannot be explained by our normal human experience. So I'm open to it. Always was open to it. Always was looking for that evidence. Right, I'm looking for the evidence behind it. I want to see it. There's this stuff out there in Area 51. Well, God damn it, open it up. Let's go see it. Right. So I've always been skeptical. I have friends that are completely been studying it, and I got a guy that we fight all the time because he really does the work. He's been reading it for over 20 years, and he thinks I'm nuts because I didn't believe him, and I never believed him, and because I could always find some kind of nut job story. They did such a great job of this information around it to make anyone that talks about it that might be rational to be crazy, right? Conspiracy theorists. So when I met David. Okay, and if you've ever met this guy, you will know he is the most honest, sane, and smart guy you'll ever meet. And for him to do what he did, put his life at risk, absolutely his life's at risk, his career, his reputation, his family, okay? At his age, here's a seriously accomplished, decorated Air Force veteran who was at the highest level in the DOD with this great job, which was to investigate the government to see what they were holding. That was his job. He wasn't just a whistleblower. Oh, I'm a guy working in the shadows and I decided to go tell a story. His job was to get that information, and he did it. And he wrote a 500 some odd page report that we can't see, and neither can Congress. How crazy is that? Okay, it's all there. It can be verified. It will be verified. And when I talked to him and when he spoke to us, I got to tell you, anyone who didn't believe is a believer in that room. I guarantee you, everyone that talked to him, I brought my family. I had my brother's a doctor. He's a skeptic. So they all came away saying, "Wow, this guy is real. This is kind of weird, scary stuff that the government can actually pull this off. The number of years that they have pulled it off." Okay. And so yeah, I'm more than a believer now. I'm desperate to get more information. I'm desperate to support people like David Grush and other people who are doing the work. I hope that Congress wakes up and passes a law. Because they actually have to pass a law. This is the crazy thing about the government. You would think the government could get access to its own secrets. There's no one in Congress that has a high enough clearance to actually get this information, and neither does the president. This is the craziest thing. How do they get laws like that they allow themselves to keep deep secrets within the military that no one can get access to? Not even the government, the president, not even the Congress. They actually have to pass a law to do it. Now they could, but they won't. Now that they tried to pass a law, but there's just enough senators apparently on both sides of the House. It's not a Republican-Democrat thing, right? That apparently are in the pockets, I suppose, of these military industrial complex companies that are getting the benefits of having access to this technology. So yeah, so I'm definitely a believer now. I want more to be done here, and I don't really know why the government's afraid of telling people. There must be another. It's either an economic motive. Maybe people are making money off of this. Maybe it's a power motive. We want to keep our prominence above Russia and China in terms of the tech wars, for arms and stuff. There's real good reasons, I suppose, for keeping it a secret. But I don't think that the government can keep it a secret much longer. So I think you're going to see this come out. My sources in the government that I now have quite a few are saying there is going to be some more disclosure over the next 2 years. I don't know if we'll get the full disclosure. Probably never will. I don't think the government's capable of full disclosure, but we'll get enough. And then my little anecdote on that, Matt, and Alec, one reason while I've been skeptical, I always was worried about a couple of stories. So one story, I don't know if you ever heard of how microwaves were invented, microwaves. Right?
No.
When I heard this story, I always thought, okay, this is probably an alien technology, right? Because it's a stupid story. Supposedly, the guy that invented it was in his office and he was doing something with the microwave thing, and he had a chocolate bar in his pocket, and the chocolate bar melted, and that's how he figured it out. That a microwave would cook food or whatever the hell it is. And I heard that story, and that was it. Yeah. Like, okay, everyone accepts that story as the story, right? Just like that, serendipity. Yeah. I said that doesn't sound like. That sounds like a kind of a weird story. So it wouldn't be surprising, and I don't know, I'm just going to toss it out there. It wouldn't be surprising. My guess is maybe we got microwave technology from some of that stuff that we came here. That's the kind of stuff when you have these breakthroughs that somehow happen from an accident in a petri dish in the lab. I'm always a little skeptical of that. So it could be a lot of this technology that came out, over the last 50 years, came from these aircrafts that came here, and they've been studying them and been using it. Wouldn't be surprising to me.
Certainly one of the interesting things that I've always thought about the whole story, and I think I go in and out of the rabbit holes. I have been out of the UFO rabbit hole for a while. I think Alec is more in it than I am at the moment, but the coinciding and the sort of the layering up of nuclear events that happen in the world, whether it's going back to World War II or before, or Fukushima. Things like that, where there are these UAPs or UFOs seen around there, or stories come out of those things. It seems to coincide with that a lot. And I don't know, what are your thoughts with that, and also just with obviously the political climate is so unbelievably hot these days, and then you layer in Ukraine, Russia, and Hamas, Iran, and Israel. It's pretty wild to think about if that might coincide with it. I don't know.
I think there is. Before I get there, I forgot something. Alec asked me. I want to just tie up that because this whole UAP and this sort of conspiracy theories, the whole way this whole ecosystem has worked between the government suppression, right, and then the true nut jobs that maybe they're not nut jobs now. We've been calling them nut jobs for all this time, who actually had the information, but the way they go about trying to expose it, does take away some of their credibility at time, right? So you got this, the conspiracy theory people, the debunkers, and all that. But the David Grush thing, like you were mentioning, Alec, so somebody was there. We told people not to film it, right? Now that we film it, we don't care, but we didn't film it back then. Part of that was to keep it so that people could have their views and not get canceled, right? That was a big part of our thing. Is like, you can exchange views, you can disagree. We don't care what political part of the spectrum you're on, and we were going to protect that by being civil and not have this sort of yelling at each other stuff that's really a problem to have discourse. It's one thing to disagree. It's another thing to hate someone because you disagree with them, right? It doesn't make any sense. So it got picked up on Reddit, then it got picked up on Twitter, then it got picked up on the news media, and oh my God, they were calling us Wall Street bigwigs, host of secret CIA meetings. I mean, they turned it into this crazy thing. And then there's this one crazy guy out there, I don't know, the dark journalist or some crazy guy that does these shows. He's been into this for years. He does all kinds of UFO stuff. He picked it up, and he took a picture of me. And then he went back and he found the story where I had dated the Russian spy, a dozen years ago. And he gets her picture, and then he goes, well, she was friends with this other Russian spy who was dating Bill Gates. And Bill Gates knows Epstein, so somehow I'm now connecting all the dots with the strings on the board. I never met Epstein or Bill Gates. I don't even know any of these people, but it's funny how they're trying to make people connect the dots that we're all sort of part of this big cabal, that are hiding the secrets. So now I'm part of the cabal. I didn't even know. I'm called the CIA Cosa Nostra mob lawyer. So,
but it was a great example of how stories just get spun and so quickly. And, I don't have a lot of firsthand knowledge of, being in the room and then also seeing the spin of the story. Like, that's not usually where I get to have both sides of it. And I was like, holy cow, like in 24 hours, it was, just this metastasizing weird story with a grain of truth. And that was about it. Right?
Exactly.
And so, but to your point though, so if that was the case there, then we should bring that same skepticism to everything that we're presented with.
Well, exactly. That's why when we start talking about Ukraine and stuff like that, because this is a good segue into that, because there's that going on in every aspect, right? You want to talk about Ukraine. Now, again, I'm lucky because I get to look at things from many different angles and I have a lot of different contexts. So when I look at a problem or an issue, I don't take anything at face value. I always know that if we're in Ukraine, there's multiple reasons why, or we're helping in Ukraine. By the way, I know we're helping in Ukraine. I know we have military on the ground over there because I know the military. I got friends of mine are deployed right now. And that's not widely known.
David Petraeus actually just had a panel last night at the Victor Pinchuk Foundation. It's just it's a pretty good, like, no bullshit conference they've been doing every year in Ukraine. And a lot of the Western luminaries go, and, you know, Tim Snyder was there and Neil Ferguson. And I mean, it's going on right now as we're recording this. And Petraeus interrupted Snyder, who was always saying we had to have more presence on the ground. He's like, well, you know, you might not realize it, but we do have a lot. And of course, this is something that's always, when you're talking about the intelligence community or however you want to define that, it's also difficult to define that when you were an open democracy and our adversaries are not an open democracy. So as a whole, it's complicated.
It's definitely complicated. And, you know, it's hard to have a conversation, a rational conversation as American citizens, right? Okay, I'm not military anymore, so I don't, you know, I'm not taking any claim that it's part of my military background. But as a civilian, you know, just a regular civilian American, I do want to know what our government's doing in support of wars overseas. I do want to know what money's being spent. I do want to know the reason why we're there, you know, and I don't want the sort of bullshit story, you know, about why we're there. And it's funny because Ukraine, if you go back and look at the history of Ukraine, you know, they were on the outs with us for a while. We thought that they were bad guys, okay? And it changed over time. And that's sort of the problem with our political system and our, you know, is that we choose sides, and those sides sometimes change, right? And we may be supporting one or the other. I mean, we're never going to support Russia, that's for sure. But you know, our allies, it's sort of a bunch of sifting sands around the world. And, you know, I have another story someday we might share about, like, Sudan, which is, you know, people don't know that Sudan has one of the biggest civil war going on for decades. And people are getting killed down there at a much greater rate than Gaza or even the Ukraine. And no one even talks about that war. And, you know, and we're in there too. So is China. So is Russia. So
and China's very, very much in there. So China's very much in there.
Right. Because they get the minerals down there that we need to run our world. And there's a lot of little battles around the world that are happening like that. And we don't talk about that. And the politics around Ukraine is tragic because, you know, that's a political battle that's happening right now in the electoral season, right, with Trump and Harris. It's not good because, you know, we got guys on the ground, troops on the ground at risk. We're spending billions of dollars to support a war that may or may not make any sense at all. And you know, that's the other thing. We got to figure out how that's going to shake out. And then in this country, I would say 99%, and I may be even being generous when at 99, might be even more than that. People don't understand at all what we're doing there or why. And that is a tragedy because the populace needs to understand this stuff better. And when they decide on who's going to be their leader, whether it's, you know, Trump or Harris, and we ought to know what their positions are and how they're going to prosecute these things going forward. And it's complicated. So I'm not, you know, saying that the politicians need to have a definitive answer. And I don't think them saying, well, we're in or we're out is a good answer. I mean, we're too far down the road now. We got to figure this stuff out. And it's the same thing with Israel. And that's been going on for 70 years, I think, has been going on, the battle over Palestine. You know, so these are tough things. And I hate to see what's happening in the political arena because we're not having great conversations about it. And that's the tragedy. And we're not doing anything to advance peace. And we're not doing anything to sort of, you know, figure out how we're going to deal with this stuff in the future. So, yeah, I'm upset about that because I think the political process is not doing a good job. And I think people's inability to get information, right? We'll go all back to the information. The media and what you get, it's so bad. You know, I have to spend hours a day sifting through the various media sources and then, you know, private, thank God for people like us and you and the people are doing this, bringing the news directly outside of the mainstream media. If it wasn't for YouTube, right, and all these other social media, we would be lost. And I never thought that was a big deal, right? I never thought that was how I was going to get my news. Can you believe that that's how I have to get my truth today? From other people like you and me who are out there trying to figure it out. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And when we pay a media, right, we pay them, the government sponsors them to give us the basics. We can't even get that out of them. So what do you guys think? I mean, I've been saying a lot of stuff. Give me some of your views so we can hash it up here.
Here's my area of concern around seeking your own truth, which is absolutely, and Matt and I talk about this all the time. I mean, I'm a consumer of a wide array of content, but I was also given the opportunity to have a great education and to be in lots of different conversations. And I think I'm fairly open-minded and therefore can consume media in a savvy and skeptical way. However, the downside of going out and seeking your own media is you get a lot of people who get sucked into rabbit holes of disinformation and single-minded thinking. And so that results in increased tribalism and entrenched views. And so not everyone has what you have, which is this broad seeking. And so the lack of a Walter Cronkite figure, maybe that's okay for certain people who are going to find the truth anyway, but I think there's a larger portion of people who are not going to do that. And that contributes to, first of all, the lowest common denominator of discourse, which is exactly where we are. And then the animus against the other side, to your point, right? There's no reason to hate someone who has a different view. In fact, that should be interesting to you. You're like, oh, tell me why, right? Like maybe you know something I don't. And one of my favorite sayings is everyone I meet knows something I don't. True. Like that's always going to be true, right? And so I'm as concerned about lack of sources of truth as I am about disinformation. And those two countervailing issues are completely unresolved right now.
So I'll ask you this, Matt, because I mean you're right, Alex. So here's sort of again, I get these takeaways. I'm learning. So by the way, part of this whole thing for me, the Terraverse, and then getting into this sort of podcasting thing, whatever we want to call it. I'm not clear on all the terms anyway, but I did it because I was being pushed that way. But I also did it because I really was having a hard time reconciling my understanding of the world from my experience, right? I'd have to either discount everything I've ever learned. I think about this, guys, right? This scared me a little bit when I thought about this. Everything I think I ever learned, in my 60 plus years of traveling this world, and I've done a lot, right? And I'm not the average guy, so I've been in rooms most people have never been in. I got access to information most people could never get, So when I think about that, and I say I'm completely and utterly, everything I know has been challenged now, right? From how many genders do we have? Up and down the list, and I'm wondering, did I miss something? Was I asleep? And what happened? So now I'm having to re-engage and try to figure out how is it that the world changed that much in my lifetime? Because I didn't see it happening. I didn't feel it happening that way. I mean, technology, all that stuff grew. That was fine. But this whole attitude now, to shift back to sort of Marxism, which I used to see back in the 70s and 60s when I was growing up, which is now 10 times worse than it was then, I didn't see that coming. It just came as a complete shock to me, and I don't know where it came from. So that's one thing. And then on the information side, you get in your bubble. So your feeds that come to you, right, they're already now through an algorithm pushing stuff to you that they think you want to hear. That's problematic. I have to fight that, right? So I have to fight my own feed sometimes to figure out what's going on. I absolutely want to hear from people on the other side. And the good thing for me, and I hope other people have this, I have been proven wrong from time to time because of the shit I got on my feed ended up not being correct. And I hadn't had enough time to debunk it and to figure it out. So it's driving me nuts, Alec, and Matt, what you're saying. I need that news feed that is going to be true, that I don't have to go do all this work every single day. And there's a lot of people out there that are trying to do that, but they're not getting any traction, as I realized. If I do my podcast, if I wanted to be a big guy, right, I'd have to take a point of view, right? And I'd have to take an extreme point of view because that's how it works. If you look at the big podcasts out there or whatever these shows are, they all have found a niche that is sort of, they found their community of people, and it's usually something controversial, right? You don't see a lot of, boring guys that are just trying to do what I do, give the truth, because who gives a shit, right? It's not fun. You got to take a point of view. And that's the tragedy right now. So now news is going to be based on how popular it is, which is just another reality TV show. Tragic. So, Matt, does any of that make any sense to you in your view?
Sure. I mean, for me, I'll try to keep it brief because my listeners know me much more than they know you. But, I've started this podcast like 7 years ago, and it was solely focused on Bitcoin. We call it Crypto Voices, but that name kind of became more illegal in the Bitcoin space because they want to just be only focused on Bitcoin, not crypto.
I see. Yeah.
But anyway, I kept the name and don't really care. So we mostly focus on Bitcoin and sound money and sovereignty. And if you have, if you really want to protect your family, protect your wealth, you can easily move it across borders, and you can have it protected in multi-sig escrow type arrangements, which are pretty incredible. It's like a superpower, really. So these things we've been discussing for many years, economic impacts of it and stuff. And then on the other side, with everything that's been happening in Ukraine in the last 2 years, that affects me very much because I'm in Latvia. I'm Latvian American, and my whole life has been focused, or not, I should say focused, but it has been the hue of it, the skew has always been towards the east, toward Eastern Europe. Like I never really had much exposure or fascination to what was happening in Asia. I know there's like tremendous, unbelievable economic growth there, and it's a whole story in itself. But for me, it was always Eastern Europe. Behind the Iron Curtain is where my relatives were, but I was growing up in the U.S. So it's pretty wild that now, I'm an adult. Not growing up in the 80s and 90s with, kind of like you said, things, even as a child, everybody could say this growing up in the 80s and 90s, things just seem simpler then, right? Compared to how our kids are, running around with phones and iPads and stuff all the time. But again, without being too in depth about it, it's interesting that, you see this one community where it's like a lot of overlap, the Bitcoiners with, I don't know, some sort of hardcore, hard right, even, Tucker Carlson fans. And I don't know if you saw that insane interview he had with this, novel historian who said that Churchill was the baddie in World War II and not
I heard that.
Not Hitler.
I got to go look that up because that scared me.
It's a whole. Yeah, it's just the whole. I mean, it's just childish from my view. But in any event, we don't have to go into that. But there's a lot of people that like that contrarianism. They like, and you can see it so much in your feed. And it's interesting in your feed to see a lot of that from Bitcoin, which really is just a neutral, self-sovereign way to run your finances, in my view. And then you have the real world where you have guns and ammo and people, unfortunately in Ukraine, getting deported and raped and murdered. And like you see that, and then people are saying, oh, it's all the United States' fault. This whole war is the United States' fault, all this NATO expansion stuff. And then not asking the next question is like, why do you think countries like all of Eastern Europe wanted to get into NATO, wanted to be away from what Russia had been doing in the past? And Ukraine is just the next step of that. So again, I could go days on this topic, and my listeners have heard enough, but for me it's interesting to see those two different views in the media.
It is. Yeah, we could spend a lot on that, and that's a good point, because not understanding the dynamics and the history of geopolitics and the like, that's where you can easily be fooled into believing sort of a false narrative, about what things are today, because you don't have the history. And I think one of the biggest things that I'm upset about, for me, is the denigration just of our model, of the U.S. model. There's no question there's flaws. There's always going to be flaws in any particular society. But when I go back, and I'm a big history buff, so I've read Hamilton, I read a lot of the old stuff. I read even all the way back to, the historical Plato and Socrates. I really enjoy watching how, understanding how people that are so smart, and I read this, I just like, oh my God, I wish I could write a sentence like that. I wish I could think those kind of thoughts at the time that you thought of. I wish I had that sort of presence of mind to come up with the things that you've come up with. And there's been so many smart people, and as we've evolved in a society and how to govern ourselves, right now at this point in time, and I don't think anyone could dispute this, they really want to be honest about it, we have the best system now to satisfy the needs of the most people. Okay, better than anything else. If we had to take care of 7-8 billion people in the world, you could not do it under any other system as well as we do, even though a large number of those billions, right, are still living in a situation which we would not want to be, most of us, okay? So we could do better and should do better, but there is no way that we would be doing as well as we would be doing now without, where we went with the Western civilization and where we went with capitalism. And I think that goes without saying. I mean, if you know anything about economics, you really want to be deep in this, and I am. I started out as an economics person. I understand it. And I understand it's because it's the human nature of people. And if you accept the human nature of people, that they're going to do what's in their best self-interest. And if you don't believe that, then I think you're going to always be wrong. And if you want to be right, that's why, Wall Streeters, they tend to bank on that stuff. That's why social media is trying to figure out everything about you, what your self-interest is, right? So we can sell to you better, and we can figure out how to unlock, your preferences ahead of time, so we can sell to you and take advantage of you. That's the nature of the world. But when it comes to Bitcoin, I want to get back to that because I know you're big on that. I didn't tell you a story that's going to be interesting. So Bitcoin is really the next iteration of how people had safety, what you're talking about, sovereignty, right? So people who grew up in the Depression, they literally put their money in mattresses. And I know people think that's a joke, and I'm going to tell you why it's not a joke, because yesterday I heard a story and I saw pictures of it. So one of my good friends, apparently his parents or grandparents, maybe his parents, I think it was, were survivors of, let's call it the Depression, and they don't trust banks. So they had all their money in like bags and stuff and stuffed in the attic, and literally it got molded and wet. And now the guy's got to take it down to the treasury, because if you can save 50% of the note, they'll replace it. So he's been drying it out. He's got tens of thousands of dollars that they put in there. His parents had hid away over the years that might be gone, because he's got to dry it out and take it. He's literally going to DC down to Treasury to see if he recouped his money. That was that generation, right? They literally put it in dollars and hid it in the mattress. And then you had, the other sort of the World War II, the boomer generation, they loved gold, right? They got sold on gold, right? Gold was the safety thing. And I know tons of people, I used to laugh at them and say, what are you doing with all these coins and all this stuff, What are you going to do with that if the world melts down, right? But they got it because gold's been a standard forever, and it's safe for them. They feel safe with gold. They don't trust the government. So there's never been a time, at least in the last 100 years, where people trusted the government to save them when it comes to currency. So now Bitcoin's in there. And the reason why I was skeptical of Bitcoin was I couldn't understand how we're going to continue to pay for the blockchain to keep it alive once all the coins are mined. And it's going to have to be appreciation of the asset, or, fees from transactions. But, right now, one of the fundamental problems is we're not having enough transactions. The fees will be too high. So until Bitcoin becomes a currency, more of a currency, right, where it's being exchanged on a daily basis, I think the fee problem is still a problem. So there is problems, and I've recognized them. I've talked to the guys in crypto, and they understand them. Bitcoin, I don't want to mess up the difference. And they understand they have problems. And the good thing, why I'm optimistic about it, and you may know that I had a SPAC, and we bought a Bitcoin miner called Grid. And, I've learned so much about the Bitcoin now. I actually know what a nonce is, which a lot of people don't. If things like that I had to go learn. I had to learn how to do revenue recognition. I actually was the guy, believe it or not, I'm not an accountant, but we could not get through the SEC review process because the Bitcoin people could not explain how they make money in a way that was able to be disclosed in a securities document, so that the market could understand how they actually make the money. And so this revenue recognition problem was a problem. So it took almost 2 years of going back and forth with the SEC to finally get the language right. And the accountants were stuck in their category. They were like, this is how we do it. We always account for things this way. And then you had the crypto people who were trying to explain how they actually collect the money, which they were having a hard time doing. And they actually didn't even get the formulas right. I had to rewrite the formulas. Good thing I actually know a little bit about math. The formula that they disclosed in their disclosure about how the money was calculated was actually wrong. And so I fixed that. And then I actually wrote the disclosure for the accountants that got it through because they just couldn't be clear. So it took a lawyer to go through and figure all this stuff out and then, write it in a way that now it's accurate. And it wasn't that there was a problem, just that you have to explain it, right? And it's very complicated, as you know, Matt. It's not easy for the average bear to get their arms around how mining occurs and how Bitcoins are generated. Forget about the whole the cryptological science behind the math problems that the computers are trying to solve and all that. But it's a lot for people to understand. And I think that's going to be its problem. We need to do a better job of making people understand it because gold is easy, right? So it's a piece of gold. It's in it's in a coin or it's in a bar or whatever. But Bitcoin's not, and dollars were easy. So once we get to do a better job, I think you'll find the adoption. And the good thing is the generational matter doesn't matter because everybody that's younger, they've already accepted it. So we don't need to teach them, but we do need to make it safe. And that's important. And I was very happy, by the way. I don't know how you feel about the ETF, but I think the Bitcoin ETFs are the smartest thing out there right now because that'll help the adoption go up faster because it's easier to hold the asset without actually having to hold the asset if there's any concern around wallets and all that other stuff. And you may or may not know, but I did the gold shares ETF, which was the first one for gold.
Wow, you were on council for that.
Yeah, I was counsel for that. I got that through the SEC too, and that was another challenge because that was the first ETF that was what they call a 1933 Act, which is a different securities set of laws that cover that ETF versus a 34 Act, which is ones that cover stocks and the like, which are typically what's in an ETF. And then crypto now is a whole new asset class. So they didn't really they didn't know how to deal with that, right? So you had 34 Act covers stocks. So if you hold stocks, that's 34 Act. If you hold a commodity or something else, that's the 33 Act. And then we had this one, well, what is that? Does it fit into 33, 34? And they had a lot of time struggling with that. And they also struggled with the custody. The main thing of an ETF is, you got to have the stuff, the stock, you own the stock, you own the gold, or you own the Bitcoin. And where is it kept? Is it safe? Like, for example, for gold, for the ETF for gold, all of the gold that backs the assets for the ETF is in a vault in the Bank of England. And at the end of the night, they just move gold in or out, right, to balance up so they have the exact amount of gold that's supposed to be behind the value of gold in the ETF shares. So the same thing has to happen with Bitcoin, right? You're going to have to move Bitcoin in and out of some custody arrangement, which I think it's Coinbase is holding the custody for most of these ETFs.
Most of them, yeah.
Yeah. So that was just a challenge, and I wanted to call those guys up when they were struggling. I said, I could probably help you out here because I've been through this before. I know what the SEC is concerned about, and the problem with the Bitcoin guys, the same was the gold guys. They didn't want to change the way they did what they did. They wanted to stick to what they were doing rather than to conform to the regulatory scheme that's out there, which isn't that hard to do. And then to try to write all the new rules, I think that was a mistake, to be honest with you. And I mean, as a lawyer, I think people would have been better off figuring out what the existing regime, right, and just building your asset class into that without trying to rewrite the whole rules. And if you look, they really haven't rewritten any rules for the most part. And guess what? Bitcoin's fine, right? The ETFs are fine. Everything's working out, right? And they hadn't. Despite all this crying about new rules, they haven't had to do that. They've been able to interpret that because that's what we do with laws, right? Laws are never going to predict everything that's going to happen in the future. You learn to interpret them based on what what it should be, and courts will do that, and then they can also make new rules if they need to at the regulatory level. So I'm glad that it's sort of slowed down with trying to write new rules. You don't need them. I think for the most part you're there, and if you have an anomaly over time that needs to be fixed, then you fix that particular thing. So I think, from that, I think you said Bitcoin's good. I don't think it's going anywhere. I think that's asset class is solid now forever. And I think the other thing is when for the mining companies, I think the good news for them is they're going to be able to diversify their cost structure by AI because the amount of compute that's going to be necessary for AI is going to dwarf Bitcoin and every other energy source, demand out there, if you can imagine. And since the Bitcoin guys already have the facilities online, right, that they can put a bunch of compute online, I think the miners are going to be able to diversify their cost structure, and that might help Bitcoin. What do you think about that?
Sounds good to me. I mean, I'm not in much in the mining pool game nor the mining game itself, but there's new players coming in all the time that have great ideas, and they're able to, at least in Bitcoin, they're able to usually extend their runway on new infrastructure and new projects for years because there's been such a massive golden goose type effect in Bitcoin in these 4-year cycles where you have these huge pumps, and as long as you know what you're doing, you can have a lot of capital and a lot of power to dry for when these retrenchments happened. Let's see if that continues. We're supposedly gearing up for the next bull run at the moment. But and hash rate is continuing to scream. So, let's see.
I looked at some of your analysis on that. I got to tell you, I'm pretty good, but you lose me sometimes. No, because I was never
on the monetary based stuff.
Yeah. I was never a quant, and I've always but I have quant tendencies, and I'm a big, I do love the old math, and I do love, seeing how things can be predicted.
The very simple buckets that I do every quarter is just if you look at all the central bank money in the world, that's at the moment $26 trillion equivalent. It's all the euros, yen that are printed by the central banks, 26 trillion. It peaked at 30 trillion in 2022, but now it's down to 26 trillion with the higher interest rates, and also currencies lose their value against the dollar, so that's an effect. So 26 trillion there. 15 trillion for gold and silver together, those markets, and the vast majority of that is gold. Silver's like $600 billion market, and Bitcoin is 1.2 trillion. So those are the 3 buckets of money that we have here, and they're all going to go up for a while. The question is, who's going to go up faster? Gold has been moving very fast this year, surprising a lot of people, I think.
Yeah, I think so. So you think it's a good? I'm curious how you think about it. You think that Bitcoin, will it replace more gold or currency? I mean, which one? I mean, it seems to me there's going to be a bit of a zero-sum game, right? Of how much currency is necessary just to run the economy, the worldwide economy. And I don't think gold actually really factors into it that much because it's not really being used to run the economy. It's more of a store of value. Do you think Bitcoin will eat into those, or will it create an additional new amount of stored capital?
Good question. I do think that it will eat into those, and I do think that eventually, if Bitcoin continues its adoption curve, which doesn't seem like it's slowing down, like I said, there are these 4-year cycles, and you get new. Every 4 years, you get new 16-year-olds that want to spend daddy's money on Bitcoin or whatever. I mean, it's an accreting asset class for sure. I think that there's going to be much less demand for dollars and euros and yen, and the theoretical thing that all the Bitcoiners talk about, and it's my handle on my social media is what is one base money, is that you can get to just one money because you only need one currency. Of course, that is like a generational thing. I mean, it's going to take a long time. Gold, it's like 50% of gold is in jewelry, 50% of silverware is in industrial. So there's like all these weird use cases for those things. But as far as actual monetary value, yeah, I think it's going to, by and large, it's going to eat in. But in the meantime, they're all going up. I mean, the last 20 years have seen major explosions in money printing, as most people know from the global financial crisis. And then also gold has gone up a lot. I mean, gold, I started looking at gold when I was in university, just by a lark, like totally random. I just looked at what ETF had doubled in the last year, and it was all these gold funds. It was like $200, back when you were working on the Spider Fund 20 years ago.
That's exactly right. That's what I'm saying. That's been a home run. It's been an absolute home run.
Yeah, and it's 2,500 now, and Bitcoin has just dwarfed any asset class in the last 15 years as far as growth. So these assets are, they feed off of each other, but I do think at the end of the day, although that day is far away, is that there will be some mostly accreting, and Bitcoin will eat into the value of of all of
Well,
them.
I think to be honest with you, now the more I talk about it, the more I got to get some money in there. But no, really, because I'm thinking about it a little differently just from this conversation today. Because as I'm exploring my own notions of this thing, I think it's the only asset that could actually replace both fiat and gold. Right, it's the only one that could be a triple player. Right, gold can't do it.
From a monetary perspective. I mean, people can like it for jewelry or whatever for gold and silver.
Yeah.
But,
leave it. I meant gold as an asset versus. I mean, that's why gold doesn't have to go away because it'll still be used for jewelry and there's still some commercial uses of silver and all that. But that's fine. That's probably what they should be for. They should get out of the sort of store value
game. Yeah,
not an efficient one, right? It's not efficient for them. So I think it would be better if Bitcoin took over that part of what you use gold for and currency. So I think now that I think about it, I said, wow, it's the only real triple threat out there that could easily be a replacement for those other two, and the other two can't replace the other ones. So that is,
I would say that's the thesis.
Well, yeah, and I hadn't heard that, but I guess it's been out there. But I'm saying I didn't come up with it. But I just, now that I hear it, I'm saying, yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. And therefore, I think that's probably in the long run the better bet. And one of the things, though, I do have to remind you, and I'm sure people have told you this, but when I first heard about it, and I was worried about it being a currency, and I thought about currency and why the dollar versus anyone else, why are the big currencies, and why are the ones that people use? And it's not so much that the government backs the currency, because it's not really true. Right? There's no money in, the government doesn't necessarily back. It's the faith of the government that is behind the currency, right? It's not actual gold. We don't have the gold standard. We don't have gold in the bank to back the currency. It's faith.
Yep.
And where does that faith come from? It comes because you have the biggest fucking army, right?
Yeah.
So I told the Bitcoin guys, I said, you guys got to get an island somewhere and get an army, and then you will have a currency because you could defend that. And until we can disengage the currency from the military force, I think that's going to be one of the ways that they continue to have, where the dollar will continue to have its preeminence, because I think that's one of the problems. And then also the fact that they can shut you down, right, if they want to. That's bad news.
Well, the shutting down thing, I think, is at least for Bitcoin itself as a network is proven to be pretty resilient.
Yeah.
But as far as like you said, the biggest fucking military, that is absolutely that's absolutely where the full credit of the U.S. government eventually lies, and as the dollar standard has lied for the last 50 years. Well, actually 80, really since Bretton Woods.
Right, Bretton Woods, yeah.
And and then fully untethered since 1971 from gold.
Right.
But, the only thing I would say to that is that's why I'm a little bit more askance looking at the rose-colored glasses of where Bitcoin can go compared to, say, a lot of Bitcoiners who think that we're going to moon tomorrow or next year, because precisely of the geopolitical issues. And again, most people would look specifically at the U.S. government in sort of a nefarious way, or just a negative way that the U.S. government is just trying to protect everything that they've built, and and they're usually going to do it poorly and corruptly and all the rest. And whatever, there's a lot of truth to that. You'll see that, like going back to the social media stuff, you'll see that down all your feeds. If you're a Bitcoiner, you'll see that 100% of the time. But then on the other side, I see what's happening in Ukraine. I see what's happening possibly happening in Taiwan. And, there's a whole world order that is being threatened by, countries that do not have Americans' best interest, for sure. And they also, it's not that if America just stands back and says, okay, you know what, go ahead, Russia, you can go ahead and take Ukraine. Maybe you can come and take the Baltics as well if you want them. And, Poland, maybe go there as well. Like that is what this order is, this new multipolar world. This is what they're really trying to do, is just go back to these old sphere of influence and stuff. And that's not going to fly. I mean, the U.S. is not going to want that to happen, nor do the allies of the U.S. want that to happen. So it's very complicated. And that's why I think, it's a long game. And this Michael Saylor from MicroStrategy, who made billions, right, on his Bitcoin investment. He has this theory that the dollar is going to still remain like the king currency. Bitcoin is going to be the king store of value. That's fine. I'm not as fond of that argument, but I think that argument in the short to midterm is probably totally logical.
You think, first of all, I share all your views on the geopolitics, and I may even be more concerned than you because of some of the access I have inside the government. They're
making me nervous now.
Well, I got to tell you right now, we're in a full-on, if you don't know it, we're in a full-on cyber war with China right now, full-on, okay? It's active, it's aggressive, and it's going on every day.
Tell us more. So Tell us more.
So that's a guarantee. We're in a cyber war already, full-on, and China's sort of like the Raptors testing the boundaries of of the defenses to see how much they can get in. That's what's going on right now. We're doing a little bit of that back and forth to see how good each other is. China, as you know, has made a clear, absolute design on Taiwan. They absolutely want it. Xi Jinping, he's made that his lifelong mission. I think you should believe the guy, right? I mean, why the hell would he say it if he's not going to do it? I think he's going to do it. And the question is when. But from a rational point of view, for me or a guy like Trump, even Mr. Businessman, you would say, well, what do they really want? What does Taiwan do for them? Is it the chip production for NVIDIA chips? Maybe, right? That's a big deal, right? They control 80% of the chips that we need. Is it just because they hate the fact that they lost this little island that they think they own? It's just a we want it back kind of thing. Is it just it's ours and we always had it, we want it back? Is it sort of just an emotional thing? Is there an economic reason? I certainly don't see it as maybe a military strategic. Maybe it is. I'm just trying to figure out what it is that's so important to China that they would take that risk, because it's a massive risk. That's a nuclear war type of risk with us, because we've put our stake in the ground as the U.S. saying there's no way we're ever going to let that happen. Is that true? Are we willing to go all the way full scale with a war with China over that? I don't know. I don't know that I would, frankly, if I'm the U.S. So that's a real issue, because I'm not sure that it's worth, the fight over that. And that could be a real problem. So that one is scaring the government, and it's definitely scaring our military people, because that's a tough call. The Russia call with Ukraine is another one. If we decide to let Russia continue to go back and decide they're going to get all their satellites back, right? They're going to go do the whole thing again. That could be a problem. I don't know that that's their design. My people haven't told me what the sort of big play is over there. It's obvious what they want with Ukraine, with the pipeline, with the coastline. There's strategic reasons for having Ukraine back. That makes sense for Russia. I understand that, but it's hard for me, not being an expert in those particular areas, to understand what the true motivations are, and they're probably not ones that we've all heard of, right? That's the only thing I can probably guarantee. Whatever the real motivations are, we probably haven't heard them. But they do worry me, and I think that's one of the reasons why I'm getting heavily into cyber. Alec knows that. I'm really concerned about that, because I think that's where the next battleground is going to be. It's not going to be conventional weapons. It's going to be cyber weapons, and that potentially, as I understand it from my sources, is that could be more debilitating to society than conventional weapons. You can affect more people by shutting the grid down, right? You can affect more people cybersecurity wise than you can by sending a lot of missiles, even, unless you're going to go a full-blown nuclear war. But you could do more damage with cyber than you could with the conventional warfare. And people probably don't get that, right? We're more at risk now than ever. And the consequences of that risk are far greater than worrying about, can anybody reach us with a missile? And I think that people are missing that point, and that is something to be concerned with. And, that ties into your security with your assets, and how do you survive a cyber war? And I think people should be preparing for that. Instead of putting the guns down, and packing a bunch of food and all that, which is all good and well, but they should be hardening their their infrastructure around their house, and how do they survive with their technology in their own house when the shit hits the fan. So I don't know the answer, but those are concerns to me. And I got to tell you this, the dollar and what happened with, the inflation recently should have been an eye opener for people. We haven't seen that kind of stuff since I grew up in the early 80s when I bought my first house. I think I paid 18 to 21%. Something was almost like a credit card amount of interest rate when I bought my first house. It was ridiculous right before Reagan came in and changed the tax code and fixed some things up. But that was scary. We were worried about inflation then, all the time. And now we're going to have it maybe for 2 years. I think it's going to come down. I think we're going to get it under control. And but still, if that could happen like that, right, from an incident like COVID, what happens if China goes and does Taiwan? Any one of these triggers could be massive. And they're worried about climate change. They should be worried about this. It's more imminent, in my view, than climate change. And yet it doesn't get talked about much, other than the one in Israel is the debate is completely morphed away from the core issue into some other issue I can't even put my arms around, to tell you the truth. Anyway, what do you think, Alec? I've been rambling.
No, these issues are the ones that, and when I say keep me up at night, I don't mean that. I actually mean keep me up at night, right? Like genuine concern. And the cyber war thing, 100%, this is going on. I think it's worse than just the perimeter, penetration testing and assessing, soft targets. And I was sitting with a guy last week who said he was in security at one of the big banks, and he said that only 5 years ago they were experiencing 1 billion attacks a month, on their network, and now they're lucky if they can get through a week without 1 billion attacks. So this is like empowered by AI, right? Advanced persistent threats, the reduction or the deflationary elements in technology that allow you to do more with less: processing power, storage space, all of that, reach, bandwidth, throughput, all of that. And so what I don't think many people understand is, if there was an invasion of Taiwan, so you're talking about Indo-PACOM and aircraft carriers and all that, but the cell phone towers and the power grids and the water and all of that's going to go off here, right? That would also be a day one thing. And so, if you've ever had your cell phone battery die and it took you an hour to go back and charge it, imagine that for a month, right? And that's a little quippy, right? But I think that's the reality. And so what you would see, in my opinion, and this is why it keeps up at night, is we saw the social fabric fray very quickly and very easily and under much less duress in the last 5 years. And we're not even under duress, and we're seeing it fray, because of this election. And so if you don't think that you put people, hungry, cold, not having running water, not being able to text their friends, no TikTok, right? Like that's now, to me, that just sounds like 1985, but I don't think we're ready for it.
Living in New York will help people if they've been around. If they haven't been around long enough. If you can remember Hurricane Sandy and a couple of the blackouts, okay, we've had a couple of big blackouts in New York, and I was here for all of them. Okay, with half of New York up to Houston was underwater. I lived down there, and I couldn't get to my house. They wouldn't let us in there. And we had a dog or something. So the guys that worked at the building used to have to walk up. I think I was on the 40th floor. They used to literally went up and, walked all the dogs, thank God. What a bunch of nice guys, right? Every day they went and fed, our animals because we couldn't get back there. New York, I will think, would not last a month. The chaos happens here probably about 2 weeks. You cut New York off, and I think it lasts 2 weeks, and you're going to have a full-on, whatever those movies show, it's going to be full-on that way. No question about it. Okay, people. And I was shocked there in Sandy because I had a house up in Connecticut, so I was living up there because we couldn't do much in the city, and they couldn't get water to people in and around New York City. I'm saying, are you kidding me? The rest of the country was open, right? It was no big deal, right? We had water. I literally packed up a bunch of water and shit in my SUV and drove down to some of these areas to bring them water. I'm saying, and the government wasn't able to do anything. And even the private sector, like myself and others who did that, it was difficult because they had everything blocked off. They wouldn't let you do anything. They wouldn't let you bring in water, even though they needed the water. So, and that was not even as bad as what we're talking about. If it happens, it's going to be bad, and it's going to be bad very fast. And I don't think people understand how bad that is. And if we ever get to electronic vehicles, it's going to be even worse. It'll be like that movie where all the cars will just keep piling up and, crashing into each other. And you can't even get a car or a truck or anything to open up because everything will be locked, somehow electronically, and you'll be screwed. And that's not that far off either, right? So I don't want to be a guy making scares and all that stuff, but the problem is it is real, and I think people don't even think about the real risk that they're facing, and it's pretty bad.
Yeah, a significant area of concern, and Bitcoin won't save us there, right? Like AI is not going to.
No, but I think people though. This is my point. People in those industries could save us, right? This is why I'm hoping for, because that talent, right, that's going into crypto, into AI, that's why I'm invested in this now. I'm invested in the AI part because I want to make sure that I know enough people who know enough about it that when this stuff happens, right, that maybe we can keep up, and figure out how to break ourselves off of the total, global grid and have a smaller grid that we can supply our own power and food and whatever to survive this thing. And that's why, who are you going to go to? You're going to have to go to the guys that know how to do this stuff. And to me, they're all going to be in AI and crypto. So yeah, I want to keep those people close. I want to learn what they learn. I want to be friends with them, and I want to know, and I want to help them, help us in a way that I think is useful. And I think that's why, for me, I'm all in on trying to find more and more of these smart people to help us with this. And I'm focused on it 100%, even though I don't personally have the chops to do it. I'm going to learn. And I'm spending time taking online classes. I'll do anything to try to figure this stuff out. I do not want to be a guy who cannot survive, because up until this point in my life, I knew when I was 12 years old, I was going to be able to survive. I had learned enough life skills, how to fix things, how to do things, that if I had to survive on my own, I could do it. Today, I couldn't say that. And that scares me. It's the first time in my life where I realized, holy shit, if this all goes down, I won't be able to figure out how to survive.
That's a great lesson, though, and it's great to have someone like yourself, acknowledge that and talk about that. It's very interesting.
I also see there's some stuff that gives me hope, and so I see the example that I think is the best example, at least that I'm aware of, is, and I know people think of him as a political figure, and I don't, but Palmer Luckey, right, and Andreal, someone coming in and bringing the absolute excellence of American ingenuity and efficiency and modernization into a very needed area of autonomous weapons to give us a deterrence, like a credible deterrence, and an ability to build weapons at scale that are effective and cost effective, right? That are effective in the battlefield and cost effective, right? Like American ingenuity, and it's not a thing we should rely on. It's not an answer, right? But we attract and have some of the best and smartest and most capable and creative people, and all of these distractions and these, the time we waste fighting each other, I find very disheartening, because if you get to the signal, there's incredible people doing incredible things. And I think we need more of that, right? And some people in AI and people in crypto, one of the things, I'll say this briefly, is one of my favorite all-time best things about discovering Bitcoin is not just the exposure to a really interesting asset class, but it was the trite statement that people I met along the way. Changed my political views, changed my economic views, exposed me to new ideas, new technologies, conversations I would have had otherwise. And I'm eternally grateful for, whatever it was, like clicking on the link, following up on that conversation that got me into this space. That is literally why I'm sitting here. And there's lots of that. And I think you're fostering that too. And maybe an area to close on, we've taken up a bunch of your time, but the conversations I have with people in real life tend to be polite, positive, thoughtful, eye-opening. And they are very different from the conversations that appear to be happening online. And you're a big conversation guy, and we're in an election year. Can we have better conversations at scale among the tribes, or are we destined to tribalism until we devolve?
This is a question that is on my mind all the time. This is at the core of what I'm doing, right? So I appreciate you asking that question because it is the core of what I'm doing. Over my lifetime, I realized a couple things. Okay, and people can kick the shit out of us, boomers or not, but we learned a few things that I think would be useful today. One of them is manners. Okay, growing up, everyone older than you had priority over you, whether you liked it or not. We had this thing about respecting our elders. It mattered. Okay, they have more experience than you. They may know shit that you don't know, and if you're nice to them, they'll probably teach it to you. Be helpful. So you start with the respect. Okay, so you didn't talk. Everything that I see online, if you said something like that to someone to their face, you better be able to defend yourself because you are going to get your ass kicked. Okay, you don't get to talk to people that way, and people don't get to talk to me that way. Only my father. Okay, he can say whatever he wants. No one else. Okay, and the notion that people think it's okay to talk like that to each other, to people they don't even know, is a tragedy. So first of all, we got to stop that. Okay, get a little respect, learn some manners. You can dispute, and when we used to dispute, like in the academic world, you wrote a paper, then everybody else could attack your paper with nice, really well written, thoughtful other papers. Okay, and you didn't have this ad hominem, attack about your personal life in there. It's your ideas that are attacked, and that's fine. That's what we can attack. You can attack my thoughts. You can attack my ideas. You can challenge my notions. Absolutely. You want to start challenging me? Well, then you're going to have to think about what that might entail. And people don't have those consequences anymore, and therefore they say a bunch of stuff that they wouldn't say if they were talking to me to my face. That's why I want to put people face to face. And as a lawyer over the years, when we did our meetings and our negotiations, they were face to face. Totally different tone now than when I do it on Zoom. You ought to hear the shit that people say, okay? Because they're in the other room. Because if they were in the same room, somebody might jump up and just put throttle them. I know it sounds crazy to hold. You don't need the physical, but just the notion of it. You wouldn't talk that way to someone. You just wouldn't. And people do when they're not face to face. So I start with get the face to face because that's one thing. The second thing is when you meet someone, if you're not already deciding you hated them, you're cordial. You give them the benefit of the doubt. You actually find out about them. And by the way, most times when you do, you find they're pretty good people. I'm not going to hate them because of what they're saying. And you can't get that when you're on a Zoom or on a Twitter or whatever the hell it is, because you don't know these people. You never get to meet them. So to me, you got to meet these people. And I want to meet people that I don't agree with. I want to hear them. I will respect them and listen to them, and I will treat them well. I'll still feed them. I'll still give them a drink, and they can hang out with me. And I don't care. I have people all over the spectrum. Matter of fact, most of the people I hang out with are far different than I am on a political spectrum. We're way different. And yet we've been friends for years, and we continue to be friends.
Well, you're in New York, so.
Yeah, I get it. But even when I went to law school, all my friends were lefties. I was a conservative, and we battled all the time. But we loved each other, and we respect each other. We still hang out today, and they certainly don't agree with me. They'll never agree with me, but they tolerate me. And they do respect what I do, in my personal life, my business life, the work that I do, that speaks for itself. It's not, my political views don't speak for me. They're just things that I have, how I feel like we ought to run our world. But I run myself differently. I run myself on my own core sort of principles, and that's do no harm, make sure you're helping people, and don't pick on people that are less capable than you. I have a bunch of little things that I live my world by. And certainly the first thing was I would never attack you. If I didn't know you, I wouldn't have anything to say about you, period. Right? I have no business attacking you if I don't know you. And even if I do know you, I better have a damn good reason for attacking you because you're doing something to hurt someone. And that's the only time I'm going to step in. I'm never going to step in if you're just saying stuff. I'm only going to step in if I feel like you're hurting someone who doesn't have the power to defend themselves. I like taking on bullies. It's what I do. And I enjoy it because bullies deserve to be taken on. Somebody's got to take them on. But that's sort of, where I come out on this stuff is I think it's important to go face to face. I want people to be face to face. And the only problem with the podcast and what people are doing, is they want adversarial ones, right? Which ones sell? When there's two guys going at each other like crazy, right? Saying a bunch of crap. That to me doesn't work. And unfortunately, when just a couple of us sit around and talk and we're not agreeing on everything, we don't have to agree on everything. We can have all kinds of conversations. We can be controversial, but we're doing it in a nice way. Well, who wants to hear that? And that's the problem, right? Nobody wants to hear that. And if we can't find a way to get people to enjoy a good conversation without like yelling at each other and calling each other stupid, I don't know where we're going to go with that. And that's why I'm starting this sort of grassroots thing. And by the way, there's a lot of demand for it. It's just not the kind of demand you're seeing online because those people are doing what they do already. The people who are not online want this. They truly want this. They want to have the conversations. They want to be heard. They want to be respected for their views, whether you agree with them or not. And by and large, I believe, and I still believe this, otherwise I wouldn't be here, most people, and I mean everywhere in the world, have the same goals and desires for their life. They want to live a good life. They want to make a decent living. They want to keep their family going. We all have the same basics, okay? And for the same, if everyone has the same basics, how is it that we are at each other's throats? I don't get it. We all want the same thing. And until we can get people back on the notion, what does that mean? How do we do it better? And how do we help each other? And then I think we'll be better off. And that takes, I think it does take the personal stuff. That's why I think it's good that we still have churches. People may not be religious if they are that, but, churches provide a big, big value in communities because they actually provide a community for people to be together and to share things together and to reinvigorate the notion of, humans, really need that interaction. We're very much social animals. And I just think somehow we need to have a few more successful media people like you guys or whoever it is that we can get out there and create a different offering. And maybe we'll have to spice it up something. I don't know what it is. I'm trying to figure it out myself, but there's a way we got to reach people where it's not just continuously, the back and forth with the fighting. And if you're not taking an extreme angle, you have no voice. And that's the problem. That's where we're at today. And I guess it's easier for the algorithms, right? You guys know this better than me. It's probably easier for the algorithms to pick and choose the extremes, right? Than to try to find how to deal with, distinguishing around people in the middle, right?
Sure.
I mean, you said it earlier, but I try to do this. I try to click on lots of different voices to make sure that the algorithm continues to feed me, not just one thing. And it actually works. Right?
No, it does. I get tons of Democratic.
I got a little everything
stuff. For mostly they want money, but yeah. I think I donated once to somebody. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, you'll never be remembered or never be forgotten.
No, I can't get rid of it now. I made a donation to a Democrat, which is amazing. I'm a Republican, but I like the guy who was in Connecticut, and because I don't go full on anything. I care about the people. It's the individuals I vote for.
Well, yeah. John, those are great words to close it. But before we do, I still have to ask, as sure. Alec said at the beginning, we're in an election year. Do you have any hope for the state of U.S. politics, the way that they're going? I mean, it just seems this has been a rough one. It's been a rough one watching from YouTube abroad from Europe. It's been pretty rough watching the scene there.
It is rough, and for me, because I've been around a long time, right? So I've been through a lot of election cycles. Every one of them had its concerns, right? You were worried about who was, but I never had in my life. This is the first time. This is, it's not going to be good that you hear this. I've never felt as bad as I have over the last 2 or 3 election cycles about where we're going as a country, not the government, right? Because the good thing about the government, as long as you have a split House, Congress is split from the president. By the way, people don't understand, I never want that to change. I never, ever want one party to have everything, ever. The best thing we can do is to have that block, jam in there where they can't do anything. Because the less they do, the better off they are. So for me, if they could be prevented from doing anything for the next 8 years, it'd be the best thing ever. Okay, the government doesn't need to do anymore. They need to sit back. The private sector is what keeps us alive. It really does, and that's what we just got to leave alone. Okay, people in this country are damn brilliant, and they're ingenious, and they'll come up with all kinds of great stuff. I have 100% confidence in that. So I don't have a problem with the people. Now, in the election cycle, what we did with COVID, and whether I don't care what side you're on, what happened with the mail-in ballots, I don't know if people realize, but mail-in ballots, which is such a small part of the typical election process, they don't even count them till after the election's over. That's how small they were up until this last one. Think about that, right? They don't even count them for the most part until after, because it doesn't matter. They wouldn't change anything. And in order to have a mail-in ballot, you had to be in the military, overseas or outside of your state, because you couldn't go to your state to vote. You had to be an invalid. It had to be or an expat overseas somewhere, right? There's like 3 cases that you could do a mail-in ballot, and it's a process. Because I was in the military, I used to use them. It was a process to get the ballots. And the hoops you had to go through to put a ballot in, because they actually were vetted more than people showing up without an ID card at some local polling place, was very, very strict. So, and it should be, right? Because you're not there in person, and, supposedly, you can screw up the ballots. The mail-in ballot was always considered to be a thing that could be a problem if it was ever big. That's why it was never big. It actually completely was irrelevant to any election in history until the last one. And in the last one, we had 20 million some odd mail-in ballots. That's an insane number of ballots. And this insane amount of mail-ins. I have no idea what happened. All I know is that something's probably happened. Did it change the election? Can't be sure. Don't know. But if you're not interested in finding out, right, and assessing the use of mail-in ballots or any other type of election process, whether it was the hanging Chad down in Florida or these new machines that, apparently can be hacked and they have outside, there's enough smoke around here about the integrity of the election. That worries me. I don't necessarily care which party gets in. I do care that it gets in because we had a valid election. And I'm very concerned that we were not even allowed to inspect that stuff. Like, for example, in Wisconsin, they withheld, you can't get the 3 states that have a problem. People don't know this stuff, but they have not allowed audits. Okay, so today we still do not know. Georgia, Wisconsin, I think one other state where they have not allowed an audit. Okay, and even in Wisconsin, it's even really bad because the Attorney General in Wisconsin has subpoenaed those records from the Democratic electoral group up there, and they can't get them. How that could happen in this world is beyond me. How is it that we can't get the records to go ahead and do an audit to see what happened in those elections? Crazy. I'm worried that this could happen again. I haven't heard what's going to happen in terms of the these ballots, but as the Democrats wanted to take away. They wanted to even let illegal immigrants vote, and that was a law they tried to pass. So it's not bullshit. I mean, it's crazy what people are trying to do to sort of stack the elections. That bothers me. Other than that, how do I feel about Trump versus Kamala? Look. I'm not a huge fan of some of the policies that the Democrats put forward. So I'm a Republican. So I have to side with Trump on a personal level. I know the guy. He used to be in New York. I think he's a jerk, and I wouldn't hang out with him. He would not be my friend. Okay. I think he's unpresidential. I think he's a disastrous sort of model for who we want to sort of speak for us as a country. Although a lot of people like his shtick, I get that because they're tired of the other, lying directly to your face constantly. But it's not what I want for our country. I want someone up there who can convey our values, right, and can do that effectively around the world and to the people without the kind of bullshit name calling. I mean, that stuff is, again, in my generation, you couldn't have that. You could never run for president and say the things that these people say, ever. And you could never run for president if you had a background that had those types of, picadillos in them, right? There used to be a vetting process where if you had some stuff, you didn't get through the process. You kind of had to live a bit of a, careful life, if you will, to get there, because anything in your history would have been disqualifying. Today, nothing in your history is disqualifying to run for president. That is strange. Like I never said, I'll never run for president. No way. I couldn't possibly pass the screening, right? The average person would say, no way. But today I can say, shit, I probably got just as much right to be there as anybody. It's crazy. So yeah, I worry about that. I don't think it's going to be as bad this time. I think hopefully people will be more careful in the voting process, and I hope that we don't have a battle. I do worry about a battle after the fact that who's going to claim that the election was stolen, and we can't keep having that. And the simple way to fix that, as you know, as you're a technologist, we could easily do that. We have technology that can easily verify who the person is, how they're voting, and we can get this all squared away. There's no lack of ability to have full and fair elections. The question is, do they really want that, and why not, and who's benefiting from having them not be full and fair? And that's who you got to look at. And I think right now I'm a little bit more concerned about the Democrats, unfortunately, than the Republicans, because the Republicans clearly did not do a good job on the ballots last time. They had the same right? They could have gone out there and harvested ballots. They could have done the same thing, but they didn't. I think they would, now that they know. So I'm not confident the Republicans won't try the same game this go around, and I worry about that. So yeah, I worry about the election integrity. And as a country, we should have that. If you think about this, almost every country in the world, all Western countries, we're the only major country that does not have a voter ID requirement to vote. How in the world could that be okay? Just to me, it can't be okay. To me, that's such a fundamental thing. And the notion that that's somehow racist is the biggest discredit to African Americans in the world, to say they don't know how to get a driver's license or an ID card. To say that out loud and actually get away with it. If I was black, I would be pissed as hell that you treated me and everyone like me as being too goddamn stupid to get a license is bullshit. And that really irritates me, because that, you talk about racist, that's the most racist thing you could possibly say to someone, is that you're too incompetent to even get a license, but somehow you're managed to have a cell phone, which you have to have a license to get. Okay, you can't get a cell phone number without a driver's license. So, I mean, it's just disrespectful, and it's disingenuous, and it's tragic. So yes, my concerns around election integrity. The party doesn't matter as much, because I think hopefully we'll have a split, right, in the House and the Senate. Keep things under control where they have to negotiate. And I hope when we get done with this cycle, this will be the last we hear of these candidates, and we get back to vetting some real candidates, or a Democrat actually goes through an election process to get picked to be president, and that we have Trump will finally be done, and his lock on the party, because he has an unbelievable lock on the party. For all of us, regular Republicans, we're stuck with what we got. But I hope that they can get the next generation of candidates out there. We need that. We need a bunch of younger people. Even though I'm old, and I think that age is not necessarily a disqualifier, but I think there is a little bit of generational change now, that we got to have people who are more amenable, right, to the needs of the largest part of the population. Because if the boomers, the greatest generation, by the way, of all time.
Go on.
There's
more than the greatest? More than the greatest generation?
The greatest generation is all dead now, so we get to take the claim. So we're the greatest now. The greatest living generation of all time. There's only 70 million of us, and there's 72 million millennials. There's 60 million Gen X's, and there's 70 million Gen Z. So we're the minority now. Right. And as the minority, we need to step back. It's time, even though we might think we're right, and we might actually do some good things for the rest of the country. I don't think we're bad people, but it's time for them to step aside, and it's time for the younger guys, to come in and step up, not because they deserve the right to be the leaders. They need to step up because it's their goddamn time to step up. I'm old. I can't be doing this forever. You guys got to step up and get the job done, and I'm relying on you. So it's not like I'm mad about it. I'm desperate. I'm desperate for you guys to step up, and I'm desperate to take on this job, because when you do, that generation, you'll see it's not an easy job, and I think it'll be good. I think you'll bring good perspective, new energy, And I believe all humans in their heart, and I believe you guys share this view, are good people, okay? And they're going to do the right thing over time. And if we encourage people rather than discourage them, right, for taking the reins of control, that would be a better thing. So I'm going to speak for boomers to the next 2 generations and say, hey, we want you. We need you. And we hope you take it over soon. And we hope you do a better job than we did. We tried our best. We didn't solve it all, but we did our best. And I think the next generation will take it to the next level. And I hope they do a good job. That's all I can say.
That's a great way, John, to end it. I love that. Positive, hopeful, and yeah.
I am.
Turn the page.
I love humans. Humans are resilient. So I have absolute confidence that we're not quite as good as cockroaches, but we'll get there.
Well, listen, where
they'll be here
where
forever.
Can our speaking of this resiliency, where can our listeners find out more about what you're doing and where to find you?
Usually you can start on page 6, but other than that, no. Usually you start there. But no, I have a thing called Terraverse TV. You can watch that. We post some content there. I ramble on now and then about some of these topics that we talked about today. We also do a monthly salon. It's a live podcast. We got some good guests coming up. We're going to have a couple of surprises towards the end of the year. You'll see those. And we're going to try to push this. When the election's done, because we want to get that through, we're going to push real hard for to turn the page on that, right? And start to look at some of the bigger stuff that we just talked about today and really push that and really try to bring a more rational discussion to the game with all the intentions of helping. I really want that to be the focus, is that we want to try to do good here. And we could debate it. And I want to debate it. We need to debate it. All right. No one's got all the answers. And the more truth we can get out there, the more voices we can get out there in the mix, I think we're better off. And I look forward to you guys, and I'm saying this with all sincerity, to continue to push this, do what you're doing, regardless of how much time and energy it costs. And I know how much it is. It's not easy. On top of all the other things you guys are doing, it's not easy, but do it, because if you don't do it, there's a voice that's going to be lost that we need. So I appreciate what you're doing. I hope people love what I'm doing. It's a labor of love, and it's because I care about people. And I hope you guys do. I know you do as well. So thank you for having me on your show. It was fun. I'd love to do it again. Well, let's get some real hot topics, then we can get a bunch of views.
Yeah,
well,
let's do it.
We didn't even get into remote viewing, so there's definitely going to be a
That's going to be a good one. That's going to be a good one. All right. Well, I appreciate it.
I love
Next
it.
time.
Thank you, John.
Thanks,
we'll link
everyone.
to it all in the
Thank you,
show notes
John.
as well.
All right.
Take care.